Thank you so much for coming. We're in a series on James, and today's about James 4. It's about conflict. Real faith reconciles conflict. And, you know, in my life, I've created a lot of conflict. And it takes me back to when Susan and I were still fairly newlyweds, and we were at an auction out west, and after that auction, we're going to take a family vacation with my brother and my dad and my mom. So the auction's over, and we're going out for this little boat ride. My mom and my dad and my brother, they get on this big boat with like 50 people. Susan and I get in one of these little fishing-type bass boats with the motor on the back that also steers the boat. You know what I mean? You sit back there, and it goes forward, it goes reverse. Okay? So the lady's getting us all set up, and we're in the same dock as the big boat, and my mom and dad, my brother, and the 50 people got on that. Susan and I are in the little boat, and the lady who's getting us all set up to go out says, in front of my new wife, do you know how to operate this? You know, I nodded, of course. My pride's not going to let me admit something like that. Susan grew up with a dad who fished, and she rode mini bikes, and she drove boats, and she can do all that stuff. I can't, but I can't let that be known, right? So I remember looking down, and I'm facing the back of the boat, and I look at forward and reverse. And I'm not sure which I picked, but I just went, wah, boom, right into this big boat with 40 feet taller than my boat. I mean, it's way up there. 50 people come run over to the edge. It's proof that the boat won't tip over if they all go to one side. But I hear this voice, and it's my dad's voice. And he goes, "What was that?" And so I got to act quickly. All right? I look back down. I don't know which way I did it before, but I'm going to go 50-50 chance I can pick the opposite. Wah, boom! If the last one was a love tap, this was an act of terrorism. And I hear my dad go, "That's Mitchell!" And I just didn't know what to say. My head was red. I probably had hair then. And I use that story to tell you this. Conflict literally means, it's from the Latin con and fligra. Con means together, and fligra means strike. It means to strike together. And conflict is two objects attempting to occupy the same space at the same time. Two objects attempting to occupy the same space at the same time. That's conflict. And we see it today. Two CEOs in a business merger. Two 3-year-olds in a preschool saying, "mine." A husband and a wife regarding finance or their children in discussions. Siblings who don't speak to each other for decades. Each represents conflict. Two objects trying to occupy the same space at the same time. I'd like you to identify in your life right now, where's that conflict with you? What two objects are trying to occupy the same space and the same time with you? Right now, what is it that's bothering you? Probably involves a task, probably involves a person, probably involves a resource. And I want you to realize today that we're differentiating between good conflict, like sports, that happens in sports, Blackhawks sectional champions, right? Basketball, congratulations. Or the good conflict that happens when all choices are equally good. Or the good conflict that happens in an economy with supply and demand. But we're differentiating between good conflict and bad conflict, the kind of conflict that ends up or results in negative or sinful behavior. That's today's focus. Jesus said in John 16:33, "In this world you will have trouble. In this world times are hard, you will have conflict." So what's the deal? The deal is that real faith reconciles conflict. Real faith reconciles conflict. And today we're going to look at 4 things. First is the cause of conflict. Second, we're going to look at the consequences of conflict. Third, we're going to look at the cure. And fourth and finally, we're going to look at the change that God has in mind in conflict. So first, you want to turn to James 4, verse 1. We're going to look at the cause of conflict. First is the cause of conflict. Verse 1, James 4:1. "What causes fight and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? And he's just set up in James 3:13 through 18, the last package of James 3, two ways of dealing with conflict. The world's way, that's kind of at the base of my brain. It's my desire to immediately provide and protect for me, based out of fear and pride. Kind of the political way that we don't like, but we're tempted to live that way in conflict all the time. And then he says that, but there's another way. That's the world's wisdom. Then there's godly wisdom, and that's different. And that's what he's going to talk about. Pride is a hardened heart condition. Just like you go to the specialist for hardening of the arteries, you come to God when your spiritual heart is hardened, when you're closed, when you're resisting to God, when you resist others, when you live a life that's all about your favorite topic, me. When life is all about me, that's pride. And that's a lock. Picture a lock on the human heart. It's saying to the world and it's saying to God that I can, you can't. And it's really interesting that the biggest conflict affecting our world today is very much a result of pride in a human heart. Saddam Hussein says that his idol is King Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible, because King Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon, and Iraq includes what was Babylon. And Saddam Hussein has restored King Nebuchadnezzar's chariot. He's restored King Nebuchadnezzar's 600-room palace. You see, he likes Nebuchadnezzar for one very important reason. Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem, and he burned it to the ground. He left the poorest behind. He took the articles from the temple. And Nebuchadnezzar built this 9 feet wide by 90 feet tall gold tower, and he commanded everyone to bow down and worship it. Saddam has referred to himself as a neo-Nebuchadnezzar. 9 foot wide, 90-foot gold tower, and says, everybody worship this. And I just want to ask, what's your 9 by 90? What's the gold tower in your life that seems to be the picture of pride? What's pride connected to? What is your 9 by 90? The cause of conflict, two objects trying to occupy the same space at the same time, is pride. And you might want to take a little test. Just ask yourself in that conflict that I asked you to picture here in the beginning, am I closed? Am I all locked up? Am I protecting my image? Do I push and try to control the other person involved? Or do I pull and try to resist that person? Those are leading indicators of pride in my life. So the cause of conflict, James says, it's pride. And now let's look at the consequences, which are three-dimensional. If you look at James 4:2 through 5, you want something, but you don't get it. You kill and you covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. Verse 3, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. You adulterous people. Don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred toward God? Doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a relationship with the seeker or someone who's seeking God. It means you shouldn't align your heart with those opposed to God, because anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world, cosmos, those opposed to God, anybody who lines your heart with that, you become an enemy of God. Verse 5, or do you think that Scripture says without reason that the Spirit He caused to live in us envies intensely? Scholars have debated about what that means. It probably means, and if you have an NASB, I think it's stated a little more clearly there, that the Spirit that God puts in you of Him, His Spirit in you, He draws that to Himself. He is jealous for your benefit. That's God's kind of jealousy, for my own benefit, versus man's kind of jealousy. I'm jealous of any benefit that you might have. So do you understand the damage in your current conflict right now, whether it's your career, whether it's a former friend, whether it's a family member, whether it's a spouse? Do you see this pyramid of three-dimensional damage? It's three things. First, it's me. Pride, the cause of pride and conflict damages Me. Damages my soul. We see it in verse 2. Selfish desire. It ends up empty. Second, it damages my relationship with others. It says through killing, which might be metaphorical, like who sings Killing Me Softly with his song? It's that kind of a thing, like the words are just killing me. Or it might mean literally killing, physically killing, because some Jews were killing Romans in part of their fight for liberation, so he might mean that.